This is New Zealand, genuinely one of the most beautiful countries in the world. But beyond its picturesque landscapes, part of its appeal lies in its extreme remoteness. It's so remote, in fact, that it's often left off global maps. With a relatively small population of just 5.3 million, New Zealanders enjoy a high standard of living, good education, a stable government, strong healthcare access, and a relatively egalitarian society. While this may sound like a dreamland, and in many ways it is, these characteristics have led to some unintuitive consequences for New Zealand's national economy, which was already quite unique. In short, Kiwis are leaving. Despite living in a country that most people would envy, New Zealanders are packing up, with many heading across the Tasman Sea to Australia. New Zealand has one of the highest emigration rates in the world. More than 10% of New Zealand's population lives in Australia. That's not a small issue. In some cases, the rate of people leaving New Zealand per capita is comparable to countries facing active conflict. Even more worrying is the fact that it's primarily young, skilled, and highly productive workers who are leaving at the start of their careers. Although the population is still growing, that growth is now being driven largely by immigration, used to fill the gaps left by skilled Kiwis heading abroad. But this approach brings its own set of challenges, compounding the issue. Meanwhile, the flow in the opposite direction, Australians moving to New Zealand, is made up mostly of wealthy retirees or investors, not workers. So, what makes New Zealand's economy so unique? Why are so many Kiwis leaving? And why is this trend proving so difficult to reverse? New Zealand's economy is shaped by two core realities: it's small, and it's remote. The entire population of New Zealand is roughly equivalent to that of Sydney, and even Australia, its much larger neighbour, isn't exactly known for its massive population. This small scale is both a blessing and a curse. It makes creating globally competitive industries very difficult, because nearly anything that can be done in New Zealand can usually be done elsewhere, cheaper, at a greater scale, and closer to major shipping routes in Asia. And this issue goes beyond traditional heavy industries. Financial services, for example, are a major export in many advanced but smaller nations, yet there's little incentive for international banking operations to set up in Auckland when options like Singapore or Sydney are so close and far more established. Even for regional business operations, Sydney provides better market access, currency stability, and broader integration into global systems. Because of this, New Zealand is left with industries that have to be there: tourism, local finance, local services, some maritime operations, and so on. With a small population, there's not much demand for large-scale industries. But digging into the specifics helps clarify where the real challenges lie. One standout is agriculture. New Zealand is one of the most agriculturally productive nations in the world, which is rare for a highly developed economy. Thanks to fertile land, abundant water, and modern technologies, New Zealand produces valuable export commodities, especially for the nearby Asian markets. However, most well-educated urban New Zealanders aren't eager to work in agriculture. There also aren't many jobs in the sector because farms are highly mechanized. Investing in top-tier equipment makes more sense when land prices are high and productivity must be maximized. This brings us to the largest sector in New Zealand's economy: housing. The selling, renting, building, financing, and regulating of housing accounts for roughly half of New Zealand's economic output. This has created two major problems. First is cost. With so much of the economy tied to land and property, New Zealand, despite being remote and sparsely populated, has some of the most unaffordable real estate in the world. The government has attempted to cool the market, such as by banning foreign buyers from purchasing homes. But the policy didn't move the needle much. Foreign buyers only made up about 3% of the market before the ban. More importantly, the ban excluded Australians, who were the largest foreign buyers. Due to strong agreements between Australia and New Zealand, citizens from each country can live, work, and own property in the other without much restriction. This means wealthy Australians continue to buy homes in desirable areas like Queenstown and Auckland. These purchases are attractive because, while house prices in New Zealand are high, they're still cheaper than in Australia's major cities. Additionally, New Zealand doesn't charge stamp duty, an upfront tax on property purchases that adds significant costs in Australia. Most housing demand still comes from within New Zealand, though prices have dropped somewhat recently. This is due to a shift in tax treatment of property, making real estate slightly less appealing as an investment. Even so, prices remain prohibitively high, particularly for young people. So, it would seem straightforward, young Kiwis can't afford homes, so they leave. But that doesn't quite explain it. Most of those moving to Australia aren't going to cheaper places. They're going to Sydney and Melbourne, some of the most expensive housing markets in the world. So, if not lower house prices, what's the real draw? Opportunity. Because New Zealand's economy only supports industries that have to be there, most skilled roles, outside of agriculture or real estate, are scarce. Larger cities in Australia offer more diverse career paths, especially for specialized professions. A fine arts curator, advanced researcher, or senior executive is unlikely to find many relevant roles in New Zealand's smaller economy, while Australia offers more depth, scale, and demand. The unique twist is that, unlike most cases of brain drain, the destination country isn't halfway around the world, it's right next door. This proximity, coupled with deep legal, political, and cultural ties, makes the move exceptionally easy. It's often compared to intra-EU migration, but even easier. Both countries speak English, share a similar culture, and have close social and economic systems. On top of that, New Zealanders moving to Australia face very little social or institutional resistance compared to migrants from other parts of the world. Education adds another layer. Australian universities offer more places, particularly in fields like medicine and engineering, and New Zealand students often pay the same tuition as locals. Many also qualify for Australian student loans. For instance, in one Australian medical school, about half the class was made up of New Zealanders. All of this makes Australia a natural next step, especially for ambitious young Kiwis. Reversing this dynamic, however, is incredibly hard. At present, almost 600,000 New Zealand-born people live in Australia, more than 10% of the entire New Zealand population. About 90,000 Australians live in New Zealand, but they tend to be older and wealthier, not the young workers needed to support an aging workforce. To fill these gaps, New Zealand relies on immigration, particularly from Asia. But many of those new arrivals leave too, again, largely for Australia. This gives New Zealand a reputation as a backdoor into Sydney or Melbourne. New Zealand offers easier immigration pathways, and once someone becomes a citizen, they can move to Australia freely. Naturally, many first-generation citizens, with fewer deep ties to New Zealand, are more likely to make that move. So now, New Zealand is starting to resemble a place where wealthy Australians and Kiwis retire in scenic peace, while immigrants provide services until they, too, move across the Tasman. While that's a slightly exaggerated picture, the underlying trend is concerning. Could New Zealand restrict its open relationship with Australia to stop the exodus? Not easily. Politically, any move to tighten ties would be unpopular, both with Kiwis living in Australia and those who value the freedom to move. The close connection benefits individuals, even if it creates national challenges. Geopolitically, the countries have one of the world's friendliest relationships. Economically, things are more complex. While losing young workers is a hit, many of them return later in life with more experience and savings, which they inject back into the local economy. The real solution lies in making New Zealand more attractive to young workers. That means better career opportunities, more competitive industries, and a more affordable housing market. None of these fixes are easy, but New Zealand does have advantages. A low debt to GDP ratio gives the government room to act, and the country remains incredibly Its beauty, safety, stability, and clean environment, while intangible, still hold real power. These qualities attract billionaires, retirees, and immigrants alike. And while they're not often featured in spreadsheets, they matter, and always will. Even in Australia, which is inadvertently draining New Zealand's talent, much of the economy still depends on those same intangible advantages.